15. I dream I'm in the courtroom. Maria is there. But she's only a reflection in the blade of a giant knife. And in the background, men are ignited by an orbital strike, turning a desert into an ocean of glass. Hours have passed by the time I wake up, much longer than I meant to rest. And another hour passes by the time I shower, dress, and take a cab into East Amber, back to the factory where Nathan was found. I'm here, but my mind is stuck in that other case from long ago. Stuck in that same old spiral of thoughts. If only I'd come home that night when I said I would. Maybe I'd have gotten there in time. Maybe I could have saved her. And later, maybe if I'd listened to my gut, ignored the advice of counsel and set off after the killer in a manhunt of my own, I could have caught him myself instead of sitting on trial for weeks, watching as my life was torn apart, my good name dragged through the mud. Watching as I became a scapegoat for both the public's disillusionment with law enforcement and the DA's outrage over unrest in Amber City. As the cab leaves me standing on 105th Street, I rub my eyes, trying to push the thoughts away. The maybes and if-onlys will drive you crazy if you let them. I was not found guilty, but I was not found not guilty either. Some legal technicality resulted in a mistrial, and rather than attempting to retry me, the city dropped the charges. It was the right decision. There was no evidence against me, only opportunity and the age-old jealous husband-type motive, which was shaky at best. The DA had seen what a slog it would be to get a conviction, and he was up for re-election that year. Another trial would have cost the city hundreds of thousands of credits and been a black mark on his record without a conviction, compared to the small smudge of letting me walk on a technicality. To the public who didn't know any better, the whole thing reeked of corruption. Headline: Charges dropped against wife-killer cop Jack the Knife Tarelli, the six-shooter killer. Amber City Police above the law? No one else was ever tried in the murder of Maria Tarelli. The DA was replaced the following election year anyway, and the case remains unsolved to this day. But I know what happened. I was cracking down hard on the Blue Wreath at the time. I was putting their operatives behind bars left and right. I gained a reputation, became a target, so they struck back, sent a message. Why couldn't they just have killed me? Why did it have to be her? I know the answer, of course, because why kill a man when you can destroy him? Since the charges against me had been dropped, I still technically had a job with the Amber PD if I wanted it. I didn't. I retired. I sold our house, got a little place out of Savage Knoll, and tried to lay low for a while. Kept to myself. Did a lot of thinking and a lot more drinking until the money ran out. Then started taking private work. For years after Maria died, I couldn't read a single news article without drawing 101 connections to her murder. Even after I moved back to Amber City, I couldn't take homicide cases. I kept seeing ghosts. Every killer was the six-shooter killer, and I'd jump right back to trying to solve Maria's murder. Hell, I still am. I could have gone anywhere in the star system. Why else would I return to Amber City? Because this is where I have to be to catch the bastard, if he's still out there somewhere. The factory on 105th is locked down tight now, but it's nothing the correct tools can't overcome. Letting the locks and chains fall beside the door with my bolt cutters, I step in, turn on my flashlight, and shut the door behind me. All I can see is what falls within the cone of my flashlight's influence. The factory looks the same as it did the last time I was here, except this time, no cops and no lights. It's black as deep space, and the darkness is made all the worse by the rainwater leaking everywhere, echoes amplified within its cavernous confines. You couldn't see somebody if he was an arm's length away, and you wouldn't hear his approach either. Picking my way back to the rear of the factory, following the trail from memory, I find it. Retractable, folding fencing has been erected in a pentagon around the scene of the crime. The crisscrossing sections of the fence cast shadows of skewed longitudes and latitudes on the far walls, shifting with every movement of my flashlight. I stop for a moment and scan my surroundings to be sure I'm alone. No monsters in here but me. I turn my attention to the giant, rusty pallets behind the crime scene, stacked up by the killer, apparently, to hide Nathan Harlan's body, and moved aside by the police. These things are huge, industrial-grade pallets designed for transporting and storing starship components. Each is 10 feet long by 10 feet wide, made of a synthetic superalloy. And each probably weighs well over 600 pounds. They are stacked one on top of another, creating 6-foot-high walls and a sort of alleyway between them. I raise my flashlight and venture between the stacks, feeling like a rat in a maze. I pause partway down the alley. I swear I heard something over the rainwater just now, straight ahead of me, at the back of the pallets. I transfer the flashlight to my off hand, slipping my good hand inside my jacket to grip the butt of my .44 in its chest holster. It's already killed 2 men tonight. If anyone else tries coming after me, they'll get the same. Creeping forward, I emerge from the back of the pallet stacks and find a second set of retractable fencing. For a moment, I think there must have been some additional feature to this crime scene that Albright withheld from me. Instead, I realize the fencing surrounds a piece of equipment. A shiny industrial gravjack with the Amber PD coat of arms emblazoned on the front. I turn around, shining my light in every direction, but all I can see are pallets and more falling water. No other equipment. So, how'd the killer move the pallets to cover the body? A dull thud from the corner. The same noise I heard before, I'm sure of it. I draw my .44. I move forward with both my arms raised in front of me, my flashlight in one hand and my weapon in the other. Ahead, I see the metal rungs of a ladder extending upward toward a small, boxcar-like room mounted high above the factory floor. That'll be the foreman's roost, used for supervising everything on the factory work below. For a couple of seconds, I just stand there, frozen in place, trying to hear the noise again. Strange sound. Sudden and loud. Loud enough to be heard over the water. Something falling from the ceiling? Or something tossed this way to distract my attention? I wheel around behind me, light and pistol held parallel, but there's nothing. Water drips down on my head as I turn back and sneak toward the corner of the factory. I hold the pistol stiff-armed and straight ahead, already bracing for the recoil. The thudding noise erupts beside me. I jump back, but something's right in my face, moving wildly, coming right at me, too close for a shot. I raise my gat to clock the attacker, but it just keeps going, higher and higher, thudding on the wing, sailing upward and toward a wide opening in the factory roof. As the pigeon exits through the gap in the roof, I can still hear the thudding of its wings. I'm left watching it go, pistol aimed stupidly in the air after it. For a little while I stand, breathing heavily, trying to settle my rattled nerves, trying to slow my heartbeat back to resting rate. I look at the ceiling, the falling water, the gun in my hand, raised and aiming upward after the bird. Upward, at about a 45-degree angle. Suddenly, I'm remembering the bruises wringing Nathan Harlan's neck. A noise from in front of the factory. Not a bird. Voices. I shut off the light and duck for cover. "Somebody's got a light back there," Wilmer O'Hara. "Police! Put your hands on your head and get down on the ground." Albright. It's so black without the flashlight that all I can see now is the dull sheen of rainwater on the ladder a few yards away. The crazy thought occurs to me to climb it and hide in the foreman's roost. It's followed by an even crazier notion to comply with Albright, but I banish both from my mind. I wouldn't make it up the ladder quickly enough, and it's not that I think John Luke would break up an old friendship over a little breaking and entering, but he might use this little stunt as leverage, and I don't like being on the wrong end of leverage. I can see the cones of 2 flashlights bobbing in my direction. I consider trying to swing wide around them and making a break for the door, but there's no way to be sure they're alone. Could be more cops outside. Something catches my eye. A bit of streetlight peeking through a broken slat in the back wall. I jog toward it. I can't contain a shout as my shin connects hard against a bit of debris. It falls over with a crash against the factory floor. "Over there!" shouts Albright. "Get down, or I blow your head off!" My shin is almost numb from the impact. Trying to ignore the pain in my knees, I double-time it toward the opening. The weathering of years, coupled with vagrant trespassing, has left an opening. A jagged, rusty corridor somebody must have wedged free a long time ago. I'm not a small man, so it takes some doing to fit through. I feel jagged metal digging into my shoulder as I squeeze through, but thankfully, the only damage is to my coat. And a little to my pride. I stumble out, turn, and hoof it up the alley. 16. The driver in taxicab 899 is either the same guy who gave me a lift the first night or his twin. A skinny little fellow with an Ulu accent, playing twangy music. Flying over the skyscrapers, I sit in the back seat, leaning back and massaging the throbbing place where I banged my shin, escaping the factory. After narrowly avoiding Albright and Wilmer, I've decided enough is enough. I'm headed downtown to the Amber City morgue. I need what I was promised in the beginning, a first-hand look at the body, because things are starting to move pretty fast, and something's just not adding up. But first, I take out my datapad and prompt a number to dial. It's time to see if any of what Caesar and I discussed has sunken in yet. Caesar answers after only 2 rings.
"Jack, how could you do such a thing?"
My brow furrows. "Come again?"
"How could you do this?"
"Caesar, I don't have the slightest—"
"You tell me to call you if I find anything,"
Caesar snaps.
"I'll tell you what I just find. My doorman, dead. Beaten to death."
For a moment, words elude me. Beaten to death? That guy was strong as an ox, and nearly as big. If I hadn't stunned him by slamming his face off the countertop, he'd have broken me in half.
"You said you want no trouble,"
snarls Caesar.
"but then you do this."
"What reason would I have to kill your doorman?" I say.
To,
Caesar stammers.
"To send a message to tell me to spill what I know."
Murder is not my idea of sending a message, especially not some poor hired muscle just trying to make a living. I trail off because my datapad's getting another call. Checking the display, I see a number I don't recognize. "Look, Caesar," I say, "I don't know who killed your doorman, but if you value your life, close up shop and lie low. If whoever did it shows up again, I suggest you do a better job running from him than you did from me."
"Jack, what am I supposed to do with this body? I can't even move this elephant of a—"
I hang up on Caesar and answer the incoming call. "Who's this?" I say.
"It isn't your mother."
I don't know when or where Fox got my number, but it doesn't really surprise me. A man who makes his living in information knows how to find things. "You caught me at a bad time, Fox," I say.
"You'll disagree when you hear what I've got to say."
"Talk fast then."
"And the pay?"
"I'll owe you."
"I'll make a note of it. Jack, Nathan Harland is alive."
I was surprised at the news of Caesar's doorman, but this one's too far out to take seriously. "I think there's some static on your end, Fox."
"He was spotted a couple hours ago at the waterfront. A jive club called The Holiday. Multiple witnesses."
"Who told you this?"
"A gentleman never asks, and a middleman never tells. But trust me, I don't deal in gossip. Only grade A stuff."
Cupping my hand over the datapad receiver, I lean forward to speak with the driver. "You familiar with a place called The Holiday at the waterfront?"
Yes, sir.
Better take us that way. There's a whir of anti-gravity engines and a quick, stomach-lurching change of momentum as the driver veers our cab out of the present sky lane to swing around, back into the opposite lane of traffic. This information is clearly a work of fiction, I say to Fox over the datapad. But I'll admit, it is perhaps interesting enough fiction to prompt my attention.
Fiction?
Says Fox. Nathan Harland is dead.
Is he?
Yes.
You sure? You saw the body, did you?
I open my mouth to tell him yes, but I have to pause here, because I didn't. I saw photos, sure, but photos can be doctored, manipulated, or fabricated entirely. I had assumed Albright ordered the body to be taken away out of professional pride, because he didn't care for a non-professional like me sticking his nose into police business. I'd have felt the same way if I were still in his position. My own personal bias and experiences filled in the gaps, perhaps incorrectly. Maybe Albright has been hiding something from me.
Jack!
I shake my head. Sorry, Fox. Gotta go. Call me if you hear anything else. I cut the connection with Fox. There's no warning, only a ping of breaking glass, and the inside of the windshield is suddenly splattered with viscous red and gray. The driver slumps forward into the controls. The change of gravity is immediate. The cab plummets. The force of free fall smashes me into my seat, then lifts me up until my head bumps against the ceiling. Alarms start screaming, trying to alert a dead driver to pull the cab out of its sudden nosedive. More bullets punch holes through the windows and ricochet off the vehicle's frame as I ride a roller coaster drop straight to hell. 17. My first instinct is to try to duck and cover from the gunshots, but I haven't the luxury. Fighting the forces of freefall, I undo my safety restraint and pull myself up to the front of the cab. Windows are popping. Broken glass showers down and floats in front of me in zero gravity. Through the bloody windshield, the world slopes away in a terrifyingly unnatural angle. Only suicide jumpers have ever seen Amber City quite like this. Crisscrossing lights of congested sky traffic are everywhere, around, in front, and below. We'll collide with another vehicle long before we reach the ground. It's a miracle we haven't hit anything already in the 3 or 4 seconds it's taken me to act. Grabbing the driver's body, I lift him out of the seat, deposit him in the passenger side. I take his place and grab the controls. We're approaching terminal velocity. Instrument displays are strobing red and black. The altimeter rolls like a slot machine paying out big. I ignore all of it and pull on the wheel, trying to ease it back. Too hard, and something will break or the boosters will stall. Not hard enough, and... The lights of the Skylane pass by me so close its drivers could have spit on the cab's hood ornament. My jaw is clenched tight and my teeth are grinding as I pull. I can feel the car responding, tilting under my command. Gravity is changing. The car is leveling out, but streets and buildings are racing up at me. I watch the skylight of a low building come and go. I'm banking out of the dive, but I can see pedestrians in the street. We're horizontal, and I'm zooming over the streets like a daredevil on a low-level flyby. The alarms stop wailing, but the instruments are still unhappy about my altitude, 20 feet off the ground. I turn hard to avoid a building, veer another to miss a commuter Airbus. I don't have the space down here to slow this thing enough for a landing. There's only one place to go: back up. I haul back on the wheel harder than ever and punch the throttle, sending the cab upward. Beside me, the driver's body moves, giving me hope, until I realize it's only his weight responding to the movement of the vehicle. I bank hard left and thread the needle through 2 parallel lanes of traffic, causing vehicles to scatter and retreat as I head back into the sky. I've just started to level out when a blast of gunfire spatters the rear of the vehicle. I growl a curse that would make a space trucker blush, then kick it into full throttle. Whoever these guys are, they don't give up easily. Glancing at the rear display, it's not hard to spot my pursuers. Only other vehicle in the sky risking incarceration by flying outside a sky lane. The headlamps hard on my tail. A big vehicle with a high hood and small dense viewports.
My cab's still holding together despite its near-death experience, but even on its best day, it couldn't outrun the rig behind me. Only a matter of time before one of their shots hits me. I glance at the cabbie in the seat beside me. They must not have had a shot at me in the back seat, so they settled for the next best thing, killing an innocent man, gunning down an innocent person just to get to me. Suddenly, I'm seeing red. My blood is boiling. Bastards. It's almost automatic. I hardly even think about what I'm doing. I draw my .44, use the pistol's nose to hammer the rest of the glass out of my window, and slam on the brakes. Reverse thrusters roar. My cab comes to a near-dead stop in midair, and the chase car is still coming. I lean out the window. The wind whips furiously in my face. My entire upper body is hanging out in the open, 300 stories above the streets of Amber City. I'm an open target, but the chase car is too busy hitting his brakes to capitalize. I'm thinking of the cabbie's last words. "Yes, sir," as I draw a bead on the vehicle's driver's side viewport and empty the clip as fast as my finger can pull the trigger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Holes pepper the driver's tiny viewport. Solid grouping, considering. I can't discern anything through its windshield, but the reaction is clear enough indication that at least one of my slugs hits home. The vehicle veers off course, barely avoids ramming my cab, and turns sideways into an off-kilter dive. I pull myself back into the window, rev the boosters, and shoot skyward. Checking my mirrors, I can see the chaser spinning in a drop, but I soon realize it's an evasion, not a death spiral. Already, the rig is starting to adjust its course for another run. I take a sharp turn around the nearest building, then drop, laying on the cab's horn to alert traffic as I swing toward the nearest lane. To their credit, the cars around me check their brakes and swerve to make room as I shoehorn the cab in amongst them and ease the throttle down to cruising speed. A cab behind me doesn't like my style and taps me with his bumper, probably before he notices the bullet holes dotting the whole rear of the vehicle. I slide a fresh clip into the .44. A few seconds later, the chaser vehicle emerges from between the skyscrapers behind me like game fowl flushed from the trees. But by now, I'm just another taxi in many skylanes full of mini-taxis. It'll be tough for him to find me unless he's close enough to see the bullet holes, and that's not going to happen because he's heading the wrong direction, following the trajectory I was taking when he last saw me. I look at the driver lying in the seat beside me. I feel sick. "I'm sorry," I say. A few minutes after the headlamps of the chaser disappear, I take an exit toward the waterfront.
18. I leave the cab in an empty lot by the river with a nice view. I shut it off, leave the keys in the ignition, and ease the seat back so the cabbie can lie in a slightly more dignified position. His death is my fault, and leaving him like this makes me feel even worse than I already do. But I've been tangled up in too much action in the past 48 hours to risk being tied to this, too. It won't take long, half an hour maybe, for the taxi company to notice cab 899's idleness. When they can't get through to the driver, they'll check its coordinates and send somebody to check it out. By then, I need to be gone. If I make it through the long night alive, I'll tell the authorities what happened to this man. No one should have to die in the crossfire like that, especially without his story being told. I'm surprised to realize I'm bleeding. Several tiny cuts line my hairless head where I was nicked by flying glass. It's nothing serious, but certainly not flattering, and I wish my hat hadn't been stepped on. I do my best to clean myself up. The holiday's not far. I continue up the street on foot. So far, 6 men have died in this mess. 3 thugs shot dead in an alleyway, Caesar's doorman beaten to death, assuming that was related at all. The driver, and of course, Nathan Harland, or supposedly anyway. Too many have died, and whoever's behind it is going to have hell to pay. Or worse, me. Partway up the street,
I remembered the tear in my coat where I ripped the shoulder open in my escape through the factory wall. Add to that some brownish bloodstains across the front, and this thing is probably beyond saving. Can't be seen like this. I gather the contents from the pockets and drop the coat in a nearby dumpster. Thankful, I've still got my blazer to conceal the axe-lug pistol holstered to my chest. Of course, shortly after ditching my coat, the rain starts again. I pull the lapel over and button it up to keep my tie from getting ruined. I already lost a nice one when I used it to bind the hands of that last thug in the alleyway. I neglected to share with Albright what the lone survivor of my would-be killer said after our scuffle and before the cops showed up. He'd been a real stubborn sort of character, but not very bright. It's easier to trick guys like that into talking than it is to beat it out of them, and a lot less work, even for a drunk man. "What was that all about, Gruesome?" I said as he started coming to. "You didn't like the look of me?" "Go to hell," he said. No need for foul language. "I said go to hell, and rot there." Then he spat on my shoes, and I was too dizzy from the drinks to avoid it. The sirens were getting pretty close by then, and I pretended to be angrier than I really was, using my opposite foot to wipe his spit from my shoe and growling, "Just what is it makes you Blue Wreath boys such irreverent gutter trash?" "You're a corpse, Jack the Knife," Gruesome yelled. "The old man's good as dead. Ain't nothing you can do about—" He didn't finish his sentence, because then I really did lose my cool. No pretending involved. I don't like that name. The shoe he just spit on came up and kicked him hard across the choppers. Before he could regain his wits, the first of the cop cars came in for a landing, and no further words could be exchanged before Jean-Luc and Wilmer arrived, turning the whole ordeal into their business. If I hadn't lost my temper, I might have gotten a little more out of him, but I still left that alley with some new information. It was what he didn't say that spoke volumes. I had no idea those goons were working for the mob, but Gruesome wasn't a bit indignant, not even surprised at being called a Blue Wreath boy. He as much as accepted it as a compliment, and if my would-be killers were working for the Blue Wreath, it means Rutherford Harlan's suspicions of mob involvement in the murder of his son may not have been far off. But something else came out of it I hadn't anticipated. The old man's good as dead. Ain't nothing you can do about the old man. His meaning is clear, and it changes everything. The usual pleasant smell of the waterfront is nowhere to be found tonight. All I can smell is the mustiness of stagnant puddles woken up by fresh rainwater, mixing to swill in the street. Alcohol stink and cigarette smoke cling like perfume to the passers-by. And up ahead, the Holiday Jive Club sits all by its lonesome. Little decks wrap around it and extend down the riverbanks, and under roof cover, the party's going on. I can hear the music even from here, an up-tempo swing of quick drums, 8-to-the-bar piano, and blasting horns. I try to focus on the music instead of the people as I push through the crowd and approach the front door. 3 large bouncers in cummerbunds and bow ties stand lazily around the door. They eye me up something fierce. Maybe it's the scratches on my head, or maybe they just don't like strangers. For a minute, I think I'm about to get tossed, but I make it through the door without any trouble. Whether that's a blessing or a curse, time will tell. The entryway has a warm, parlor sort of feel to it. It'd probably be nice, if not for the people. It's been years since I've been anywhere so crowded. Bodies are everywhere, the majority half my age or younger, drinking, dancing, and smoking. Most are sauced and still filling the tank, and it occurs to me that Fox's sources may not be as reliable as he thinks. How anybody would take notice of any one specific face in this crowd is beyond me. But I've got to do my due diligence here, because after my discussion with that thug in the alleyway, this has become more than just a hunt for a killer. It's a race to prevent the murder of a second target, maybe the only real target all along. The old man, Rutherford. I consider consulting the bartender, but one look at the queue of thirsty drinkers in the way changes my mind. I decided to case the joint instead. The music becomes even louder as I shuffle through the parlor and into a dance hall. The band must be somewhere close by, but the lighting is too dim, and I can't see much through the crowd. A young guy spins in mid-dance and bounces off me so hard it nearly knocks him off his feet. The kid turns around, sleeves rolled up, looking sore and ready to sock whoever ruined his good time. He takes one look at me, big, scratched up, the vein in my forehead probably bulging, and he scurries off. Deeper in the club, I find a lighted corridor and follow it to a side room where things are more my speed. There's a roulette wheel near the entrance and table games set up across the room. The guests in here are better dressed and grimmer looking than the dancers out there with the band. They gamble and sip drinks delivered to them on platters. I walk in, trying to look inconspicuous. Security guards in the corners watch me. Other than that, the only eyes that seem to even notice me are soft, brown ones, like Rutherford Harlan's, yet somehow completely different. Yvonne Reed. Mrs. Reed does nothing to give away that she knows me. After we lock eyes, she turns back to the table and pushes a pile of chips across the felt. It's as I'm watching her that my datapad goes off. I check it, not in the mood to deal with more of Caesar's frantic rambling, but instead, the incoming number belongs to none other than Rutherford himself. I head to the bar, take an empty stool, and answer the call. "Yeah," I say. "Hello, Jack." "Is everything all right?" I ask. "I have some news. Can you talk?" I take a quick look around. Although the room is crowded, they're all too busy in their own affairs to pay me any mind. "I've got a minute. Go ahead." "Where to begin?" says Rutherford. He sounds distressed, even more so than he was at our first meeting. "I was attempting to get Nathan's affairs in order when my bookkeepers uncovered something. Nathan was spending company money." "Let me guess," I say. "On real estate, under the name Royal Evening." A pause. "You knew." "Knowing is what you hired me for." He makes a throaty noise. Indeed. Does it have something to do with his death?" "I don't know for certain yet. I should have told you about it myself, but I've gotten a little tangled up. Had a few unfortunate run-ins." I look over my shoulder at Yvonne Reed at the card table. Speaking of run-ins. "Mr. Harland," I say, "can I ask you something personal?" "Proceed with caution, Mr. Tarelli." "What's the story with your daughter?" "Yvonne is a dear, but she's rotten, contentious, selfish almost beyond logic at times. I think she has an undiagnosed personality disorder." "Fatherly love has not blinded you." "If only. It's my fault, I'm sure. I was never much of a father to her. I was already old when she was born, and before I knew it, she'd grown up and gotten married. She moved back in with me after her husband left her, and she's been here ever since, jealously possessive of my attention. Don't let her age fool you. She never really grew up. But if you're asking me if I think she's a killer, no. Imbalanced, maybe. But I don't think she's a murderer. Just a brat. Not at all fit to run my company's affairs after I'm gone. That was Nathan's destiny. But now I sit here revising my will, trying to decide whether to split up my empire, granting independence to all my subsidiaries, and effectively rending a life's work. Or leave everything to Yvonne, and in the hands of a child who'd rather rip the wings off butterflies." "Right," I say. "I'll let you return to your work, detective," says Harland with a weary sigh. "Best of luck." "Best to you, too." The connection is broken, and I put the datapad away. "I get you something, Mac?" The well-dressed bartender is looking at me expectantly. Before I can answer, a voice from behind says, "Well, I wouldn't mind a drink." Turning, I come face to face with Yvonne Reed. She's wearing a long black evening gown with a slit running from ankle to thigh. Her dark hair is done up, and her brown eyes are watching me. "Whatever the lady's having," I say. 19. Leaning with her back against the bar, Yvonne takes a sip of her drink and studies the scratches on my head. "My, you're a mess," she says. "Some days more than others," I say, wondering if she heard any of my conversation with Rutherford. If she did, she's not giving it away. "How's your luck tonight?" "The tables." "Oh, it's been all right. But gambling bores me, unless it's the horses." "Come here often?" "Are you trying to flirt with me? You must be 20 years my senior, Mr. Tarelli. Shame on you." "Well, a beautiful woman, looking lonely. You can't blame a guy. You are alone, aren't you? Not very smart in this part of town." Yvonne looks around the room in an unconcerned sort of way.
"You might be surprised to learn I'm not the delicate flower you think I am."
I watch her carefully as I say, "You here looking for your brother?" It reins in her full attention, and try as she might, she can't hide that she is at once interested, yet unsurprised. I'll take that as a yes. "You know," I say, "it took a pretty good intelligence man to lead me down here. For you to have beaten me to the punch, you must have a pretty good intelligence man yourself." She smirks.
"Who says it's a man?"
"Uh-huh," I say. "I've been enjoying your little act, by the way. My favorite part was that first night when you pretended not to know why I was meeting with your father. Anyone with half a brain could have guessed I was a detective. But you were playing dumb. You reprised the role the next day over the phone." Yvonne downs her drink and slides the empty glass up the bar with a flick of her finger.
"It's not a hard part to play. Most people assume, before I even open my mouth, that I am a self-important, brainless twit. Growing up in my father's shadow, I learned it was easier to get ahead if I pretended to be what everybody already thought I was."
"I see," I say. "And I truly do. A smart, ambitious woman in her position might have fought to prove herself. But an uncommonly smart, deadly ambitious woman, like Yvonne, would devise a means to use her circumstances to her advantage. Play the part of the spoiled, ditzy socialite. Operate in the shadows. You hide the real you to get what you want," I say.
"Or need."
"So, who is the real Yvonne?"
"Getting a little personal, Jack. Only one man ever knew the answer to that question, and I guess he didn't like it much because he didn't stick around."
"Your husband clearly wasn't man enough to handle a strong woman."
"That's quite enough of that. You want to know what I'm doing down here? Well, same as you. Trying to find out if there's any stock to the rumors of my supposedly dead brother walking around alive and well."
"Have you?"
"Some witnesses say he came in wearing a large black suit and hat, acting like he was trying to hide who he was. They swear up and down it was him."
"What do you make of it?"
"You're the detective."
The bartender has returned to sit a fresh drink in front of her even though she didn't ask for one. She smiles at him, running a finger over the countertop, making little circles with her nail, and looking coy. "If Nathan somehow faked his death," I say once the bartender's out of earshot, "then it begs the question, what reason did he have to do it? What did he have to gain from disappearing?"
"And you think I know?"
"No," I say. But asking rhetorical questions out loud sometimes elicits useful responses.
"Well, here's one rhetorical question you haven't asked, hotshot. What if he didn't have anything to gain? What if he was in some sort of trouble and was trying to get away from it? Or what if he didn't fake his death at all and somebody else faked it for him?"
"That's 3 questions," I say. I'm trying to play it cool, but this woman's cunning is keeping me on my toes. It doesn't jive with Rutherford's description of her, And if even her own father doesn't know who she really is, what else might she be hiding? Is she just playing me right now, setting my mind off after false leads?
As for what Nathan would be doing here, says Yvonne,
so low I have to lean in to hear her.
If you had done your homework, then you'd know that a few Blue Wreath agents operate out of the back room of the holiday. And they've been staring daggers at you since you walked in.
I start to say something, but before I can get it out, she says, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, and in a much different tone of voice,
Well, are you going to walk me out, or aren't you?
I thought you weren't afraid of being alone, I reply.
Oh, I'm not. But you'll feel better knowing I get home safely.
But by now it's clear who's looking after who. 20. No one follows us out of the club, for which I am grateful. I pay a taxi to take Yvonne home. Maybe it's a testament to her quiet intelligence that it doesn't occur to me until she's already airborne. How perfectly ridiculous it was for me to pay for her to get a taxi. I hail a taxi for myself and tell him to take me to 105th. Again. Maybe I'll have better luck this time. I pay special attention to the driver, and I silently pray that picking me up won't turn out to be the biggest mistake of his life. In fact, I'm paying such special attention to the sky around me, scanning for any sign of a familiar vehicle, possibly with tightly grouped bullet holes riddled across its splintered windshield, that I don't notice the trouble below. As the cab lowers down to 105th, I realize a moment too late that there's an Amber PD squad car with its lights off sitting right in front of the factory. I growl angrily at my own foolishness, recognizing Jean-Luc Albright leaning against the hood of the cruiser, smoking a cigarette, watching me come down. Too late to turn back now. I pay the driver and step out into the street. As the taxi takes off, Albright makes a show of casually watching me. He's got his right hand under his coat, and he's making a show of that, too. Little Wilmer O'Hara steps out from the other side of the cruiser. "And what do you think you're doing here?" he blurts out. "You forgot the bolt cutters," says Albright. "Don't own any bolt cutters," I reply, "but I could use a pair if they're just lying around." The looks on both their faces say they're done playing. Fortunately, I know that the best way to deal with angry dogs is to give them something to chew on. "I don't know what the night's been like for you boys so far," I say, "but it might interest you to know that the deeper I get sucked into this thing, the more somebody seems to want me dead. In my experience, that means I'm getting warmer. It might also interest you to know there's a rumor going around that Nathan Harland is back from the dead." Wilmer and Albright exchange a look. "Funny you should mention that," says Albright. "Albright, don't!" Wilmer hisses. I watch them both carefully for a second. "Tarelli is ex-homicide," Albright says. "I don't like breaking regulation any more than you do, Wilmer, but we could use the manpower. All three of us are working the same case anyway. Might as well be all three of us who bring him in." "Bring who in?" I say. Albright gestures for his partner to answer. Wilmer sighs and says, "Nathan." "Tell him what happened, Wilmer," says Albright. Wilmer clears his throat. "I got a call from somebody claiming to have information relating to the Harlan case. For a second, I thought it was you again. Then the guy said he was Nathan Harland, and he wanted to meet us at the place where he killed himself." A crack of thunder comes echoing through the city from somewhere far away. The rain starts coming down harder. Wilmer tugs his coat tightly around his shoulders. Albright seems not to notice. He pulls out his datapad and checks the time. "Whoever made the call," he says, "they should have been here by now, unless it was a fake, as I suspect." Wilmer, looking miserable with his shoulders scrunched up beneath his coat, squeaks, "Couldn't we wait inside?" Albright sighs and starts toward the factory door, but I raise a hand to stop him. "Your mystery caller Might not like the rain either, I say, drawing my axe-lug pistol. Both men seem to agree. From a chest holster, Wilmer draws a small, boxy-looking particle pistol. Albright opens the cruiser's trunk and pulls out a double-barreled axe-lug shotgun. He cracks it open and slides 2 scattershot cartridges inside. 21. Wilmer is first through the door, eager to get out of the rain. All 3 of us have flashlights, and we turn them on to illuminate the immediate darkness. The factory is the same, dark, with rainwater pouring in through the ceiling and pooling all over, but somehow it feels worse in here than ever. Our triple cones of light scan the entryway like spaceport searchlights as we inch our way in.
"Think anyone's in here?"
Wilmer whispers. "One way to find out," says Albright. "Better take point, Tarelli." "I'm flattered," I grumble. All he wants is to keep an eye on me, of course, but I'm the odd man out. So I go ahead and step in front of Wilmer to lead the way. Albright takes position behind me, the big double barrel cradled in his arms like a baby. Thunder, getting closer, erupts outside. I hear the rafters rattle. Moving at a cautious speed, I pick my way toward the scene of the crime at the rear of the factory, past rusted pallets, abandoned equipment, and waterfalls of leaking rainwater. Nobody and nothing out of the ordinary to be seen, but that only goes so far in the way of comfort. Maybe it's Albright behind me, or maybe it's just nerves, but I have a profound feeling that I'm being watched. It takes almost a full minute of our crawling speed to make it to the blood-stained floor encircled by fold-out fencing. This is where the body was found, supposedly. I'm reminded that I never actually saw it here for myself. "Hey! Anybody in here?" Albright's shout is so loud and sudden that it makes me jump. His voice echoes for miles, but there's no response. "I don't know about all this," Albright growls. I'm still scanning the surroundings with my flashlight. "Beginning to feel a little stupid in here, hollering at dead people." He's just finished the sentence, the last sentence he will ever speak, when the first shot is fired. A bright flash of red behind me, the sound like the release of high-pressure steam. I wheel around with my light and my gun raised. Albright's looking at me with his shoulders slumped forward like a hunchback. I can't tell if he's confused or angry or both. There are 2 more flashes, and 2 red beams of light burn out through the front of his chest and go sizzling over my head. Tiny flames jump from his jacket, trailing smoke. His body shakes. He drops his shotgun. All of this happens before I can find the form of little Wilmer O'Hara behind him, particle pistol raised, blasting his partner in the back. Wilmer turns the gun on me. I leap sideways, hearing the hiss of a shot that barely misses. Albright, still somehow on his feet, tries to take a step at Wilmer, but it's all he's got left in him. He trips and collapses in a heap. The flashlight has fallen from my hand. I can't see anything of Wilmer except for the beam of his own flashlight. I lunge for it, catch hold of his wrist, and twist with all my might. I feel reverberations of grinding and popping beneath the skin as Wilmer's bones break under my fingers. He screams in pain. His pistol clatters against the factory floor. Wilmer wraps up with me, grabs my face and digs in with his fingernails, going for the eyes. My hand's still clutching his broken wrist. Discarded flashlights point aimlessly across the factory floor, but in the peripheral illumination, I can see Wilmer's face, twisted into a conglomeration of pain, rage, and desperation as his teeth clamp down on my hand. I throw an elbow, knocking him back a step, then swing my .44. It's too dark to see, but I can feel the impact as the butt cracks against Wilmer's temple. He makes a pitiful sound, then crumples to the ground, out cold. I snatch up my flashlight, find Wilmer's particle pistol, and give it a swift kick, sending it spinning across the factory floor well out of reach. It's only out of habit that my body knows to do this. My mind is having a hard time keeping up. I point the light at Wilmer to confirm he's out, then turn to check his partner, but it's as I feared. Jean-Luc Albright is dead. Damn it all, I say. The call was a fake, all right. That much is clear now. Wilmer must have fabricated it, and the whole story about Nathan, just to bring his partner back to the factory and eliminate him. But why? Not bad. I spin toward the voice, pointing my light and weapon toward the source of the sound, ready to shoot. Behind me, less than a dozen feet away, stands Nathan Harland.